Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Hey, Monday morning, everybody, and welcome to the Michael Brown Unplugged podcast. If I seem a little out of sorts this morning or not quite as enthusiastic as I normally am when I'm doing the podcast, it's because I'm fighting this cold, and it's just, well, can we just be like a couple of old farts in the nursing home and complain about all of our ailments today? I want to get to a couple of sound bites pretty quickly, but before I'll tell you what the sound bites are. The Democrat John Delaney, who is running for president on the Democrat ticket, and John Hickenlooper, former governor of Colorado, who's also running for the presidency on the Democrat ticket, appeared before the California Democratic Party convention. Now, before I tell you or let you listen to the sound bites, I want to talk about who shows up at party conventions, Democrat or Republican. Almost always, the vast majority of people who show up for conventions are party activists. They are the people who have taken the time, the energy, the effort. They're spending their own money. They're traveling. You know, in the case of California, I don't know where it was held. It's unimportant where it's held. But let's say in Colorado, for example, if the state party convention is held in Denver or Colorado Springs, for example, and you live in Montrose, or you live in Durango, or you live in Grand Junction, or you live down in Springfield, you have to travel all of that way on your own. You have to pay for your own hotel room. You have to pay for your own meals. You have to pay for the registration fee. You have to do all of those things on your own. So party conventions are generally made up of party activists. The most engaged and fervent members of the party. So let's get to the sound bites. In both instances, both candidates, John Delaney and John Hickenlooper, make referral to, in this case, John Delaney, says that Medicare for all may sound good, but it's actually not good policy, nor is it good politics. That's what he says. But what I want you to pay attention to is the reaction of the audience. This is John Delaney.
But we need, as Democrats, to build an economy that works. But it's got to be with smart policies. Medicare for all may sound good, but it's actually not good policy, nor is it good politics. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. 100. We should have universal health care. We should have universal health care. We should have universal health care. We should have universal health care, but it shouldn't be a kind of health care that kicks 150 million Americans off their health care. That's not smart policy. I want everyone to have health care, but it's got to be a plan that works for every American. No. This is called the battle of ideas, my friends.
And they boo not only his statement that Medicare for all may sound good, but it's actually not good policy, nor is it good politics. They boo that. But even more amazing to me is that when he says in trying to control the crowd and trying to get them to understand that, hey, I'm one of you, this is called the battle of ideas, they boo the phrase, but this is the battle of ideas. If you want to know just exactly how far left the activists are in the Democrat Party. John Delaney's attempt to say that Medicare for all is not good policy and not good politics, even though he wants quality health care coverage for everyone, they boo him nonetheless. And then John Hickenlooper shows up.
If we want to beat Donald Trump and achieve big progressive goals, socialism is not the answer. I was reelected in a purple state in 2014, one of the worst years for Democrats in a quarter century. If we're not careful, we're going to end up helping to reelect the worst president in American history. We shouldn't try to achieve universal coverage by removing private insurance from over 150 million Americans. We should not try to tackle climate change by guaranteeing every American a government job. Hold on. As the Democratic Party, we have to create a vision for this country. I want to give Americans a reason to look forward to tomorrow. As president, I will make health care a right, not a privilege, with a real public option. I will tackle climate change with a laser focus. I will once and for all take on the NRA and have universal background checks on all gun sales.
Booze and booze and booze. Not booze. Well, if I had been at the Democrat convention, I probably would have needed some booze. But he's receiving booze for decrying socialism. That's not the answer. The Green New Deal is not the answer. Basically telling everybody that if you want to beat what John Hickenlooper describes as the worst president in American history, that they're going to have to back away from these ideas. And both of these candidates, neither of whom I think have a chance in hell of winning, but both of these candidates get booed by the party activists at the California Democrat Convention. Now, why do I think any of this is important? If you don't believe that there is truly a schism in American politics, this is it. Now, in a crowded field of, 22, 24 people running for president on the Democrat ticket, you would expect some moderates. You would expect the wackos. I think Hickenlooper is a wacko, but you would expect some wackos. You would expect people to be in all sorts of political positions when you have 24 people running. You would have everything from those that are just truly the far left Marxists, and then you would have those that are hidden in sheep's clothing like John Hickenlooper, who's trying to be a middle-of-the-road guy. But irrespective of that, the activists are booing when they say we can't run on socialism and we can't run on Medicare for all, that those are losing campaign promises. They're both right. They're both absolutely correct in that. But I don't want them to shut up. I want them to keep saying that. I want them to keep getting booed because I want everyone to understand just how far left the Democrat Party has moved, such that their activists, the people, and here's why it's important to think about them in terms of activists. Every nominee, each of the two nominees, are going to need those activists in order to staff campaign headquarters in all 50 states. They're going to need those activists to act as precinct chairman. They're going to need those activists to help them do all of the grunt work of a campaign. They're not necessarily going to be the people who are going to be doing the fundraising, but they're going to be the grassroots effort to get the vote out, to make certain that their candidate gets every possible vote out there. And if those activists are stuck with a nominee that they don't like their position, they're going to stay home. So that if, and I don't think this is going to happen, and this is the fine line that Joe Biden has to walk, if he's going to try to be Mr. Moderate, you notice that Joe Biden didn't go to the California Democratic Convention. He didn't go speak. He's not saying those things. He's trying to walk a tightrope. He's trying to walk a tightrope to the convention. so that eventually he can get past the convention on that tightrope. I don't think he's going to be able to do it. I think what we're seeing and going to see at these conventions between now and when they start doing the debates is that the candidates themselves will continue to move further and further to the left. The activists will become more and more vocal, and the schism between the two parties will become even greater. But as one who's never thought that bipartisanship is necessarily a good thing, in fact, I think in most instances, bipartisanship is actually a bad thing, I think this is good. This will differentiate, assuming that Donald Trump is the nominee, this will differentiate Donald Trump from whoever the ultimate nominee is in the Democrat Party. Or if the ultimate nominee in the Democrat Party keeps trying to move back to the middle, which they ultimately always do after the primaries, they're going to lose the enthusiasm of their base. None of this bodes well for the Democrats in 2020. But I think there's an unintended consequence that we need to watch for. And that unintended consequence is that as this splintering continues in the Democrat Party, what's the one thing that they can probably all rally around? Now, I think it's a mistake, but I think it's something they can all rally around, and that would be impeachment. Mark my words. You will soon start hearing the candidates, depending on how much Maxine Waters, how much Al Green, and depending on what Nancy Pelosi ultimately does in terms of whether or not she says we can go forward or they can go forward with impeachment. If those floodgates open, then you'll see the candidates move away from socialism, they'll move away from Medicare for all, and they will start using impeachment as the focal point of their campaigns. The only thing that's preventing that from happening right now, Nancy Pelosi. But she's hurting a bunch of cats, a bunch of feral cats. And whether or not she can continue to do that, that remains to be seen. So here you have these two candidates booed for basically saying that the two basic tenets that all these candidates have been running on right now, Medicare for all and socialism, the Green New Deal and all of its socialism, they're saying not winnable, and they're getting booed. Like I say, get the popcorn. Oh, man, is it going to be fun. Now, I can't leave the Democrat convention in California without mentioning that Nancy Pelosi also showed up. And speaking of impeachment, she mentioned impeachment. She didn't mention impeachment. She started talking about the 12 items that they believe are proof that the President of the United States attempted to obstruct justice. Although an attempt to obstruct justice versus actually obstructing justice, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. But George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Week yesterday had Adam Schiff, the Democrat congressman from California, who has been in terms of the House Oversight Committee, who has been pushing all of these narratives about all these things that Trump did wrong, is asked by George Stephanopoulos whether or not they're going to move on impeachment. The clip on ABC This Week goes like this.
Thank you for joining us this morning. I know you're coming to us from San Francisco this morning, site of that state convention yesterday. And I want to start by showing everyone House Speaker Nancy Pelosi speaking to that convention and almost getting drowned out by these calls for impeachment. Let's listen.
The report lays out 11 instances of possible obstruction of justice by the President of the United States.
And now you've been supporting the Speaker as she holds the line against impeachment, but the pressure is building. Can you hold the line?
Well, look, I think we're going to do what's right for the country. And at this point, the Speaker has not reached the conclusion, and I haven't either, that it's best for the country to put us through an impeachment proceeding that we know is destined for failure in the Senate. Now, that calculus may change if the president continues to stonewall, if the president continues to demonstrate his unfitness for office. There may be little additional cost to going through that process. It is, in a way, even if unsuccessful in the Senate, the ultimate form of censure in the House. But we're not there yet, and I think if it is a close call, close calls go against putting the country through that. We have an important legislative agenda to try to advance. We have important oversight work we can do outside the context of impeachment. And I think at this point that is still the preferred course.
Oh, really? Still the preferred course? What happened to all that evidence that Adam Schiff claimed to have had? What happened to all the evidence of all of this wrongdoing, that impeachment was almost a foregone conclusion? Now that the Mueller report's out, now that Bob Mueller's come out and made that dumbass statement that he made about the report, now that everyone's had a chance to see what's going on, and more importantly, now that the Attorney General is conducting the investigation into the origins of this spying on the Trump campaign, now they're reeling in because the Democrats know that absent overwhelming evidence of obstruction, everybody always wants to compare this to Watergate. In Watergate, there was overwhelming evidence that the President of the United States was engaged in part of the cover-up, that the President of the United States had weaponized the Internal Revenue Service. Oh, gee, who else did that? Oh, yeah, what was his name? Barack Obama. Absent the overwhelming evidence of obstruction of justice, like you had in Watergate, I think even debating articles of impeachment and having that go on in the House of Representatives will backfire. Because Adam Schiff is right about one thing. It will die in the Senate. Now, there still has to be a trial. If the House of Representatives actually passes articles of impeachment against the president, there has to be a trial. The impeachment managers, the House managers, will have to take those charges to the Senate, and in front of all the senators, they will have to present their charges. Senate will vote. I think that will be the death knell for the Democrats in 2020. And I think they know that. And so now people like Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi are trying to back everybody off. But whether they can do that, considering just how rabid the California Democrat convention was, that remains to be seen. And I'll say it again. Get a tub of popcorn. Because my, oh my, you and I are going to have so much fun on this podcast watching what goes on between now and November of 2020. CNN Politics had a story over the weekend. The headline is this: Trump tells The Sun, that's a UK newspaper, Meghan Markle is nasty, and Boris Johnson would do a very good job as prime minister. The subheading, then, before you get to the story is, Donald Trump called Meghan Markle nasty, then tried to suck up to her before Prince Harry lunch. Except that's not at all what Donald Trump said. I have, over the course of the past couple of years, really tried to avoid all of the so-called fake news stories because they're boring, they're just stupid, and quite frankly, I think most of you, I think all of us, I can't speak for everybody, but if you're listening to this podcast, most of us recognize the fake news that goes on almost all the time. And so it's not really a story. But when CNN Politics says unequivocally that Donald Trump called Prince Harry's wife, Meghan Markle, nasty, said that she was nasty, that is so blatantly false that I have to call it out. Here's what Trump actually said.
Meghan, who's now the Duchess of Sussex, right? We've given her a different name. She can't make it because she's got maternity leave. Are you sorry not to see her because she wasn't so nice about you during the campaign? I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't know that. No.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. No. I hope she's okay. I did not know that. No.
She said she'd move to Canada if you got elected. Turned out she moved to Britain.
Well, that would be good. There are a lot of people moving here. So what can I say? No, I didn't know that she was nasty.
Is it good having an American princess then, Mr. President? Is that
well,
sort of help the links?
I think it's nice. I think it's nice, and I'm sure she'll do excellently. She'll be very good. She'll be very good. I hope she does.
It's clear. In fact, what I find fascinating about this clip is not only did Donald Trump not call Meghan Markle nasty. He is in response to the reporter's question where the reporter says that Meghan Markle was nasty to you. He bends over backwards. No, I didn't know that. No, I hadn't heard that. No, I didn't know it. And then says, no, I didn't know she was nasty to me. How can any interpretation of that be that he's saying that Meghan Markle was nasty? It's not, or is nasty. It's not at all what he's saying. And in fact, this is one of, in my opinion, this is one of Donald Trump's most diplomatic dealings with someone that he knows he can't attack. He knows he shouldn't attack her. And so when the reporter says Meghan Markle has said that you're nasty and that she's going to move to Canada and blah, 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 he's like, well, no, I didn't know that. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, I hope she's okay. You know, I hope she's doing fine. You know, a lot of people are moving here. No, I didn't know she called me nasty. It is so blatantly false, and it is so blatantly taken out of context that CNN, well, I would say CNN needs to be ashamed, but, well, that would mean that you would have to understand what being ashamed is, and I don't think CNN is capable of that. On Friday, I was coming back from the undisclosed location back up to Colorado. And so I didn't hear the story about the shooting in Virginia Beach. And if you haven't heard the story, I wouldn't be surprised that you haven't heard the story, because I only learned about it when I got back to the house, and there was something on my Twitter feed or somewhere. I forget, it's immaterial, but there was something that something caught my eye that, there's been a shooting somewhere. So I dug around to find the story, and it turns out that on late Friday afternoon, there was a mass shooting at the Virginia Beach Municipal Building, which, by the way, is a gun-free zone. But it wasn't until Saturday morning that the identity of the shooter and the weapon that he used was released. By Saturday morning, that story of 12 people being shot in a mass shooting was completely off the radar. I think on CBS Sunday Morning yesterday, the news show that I tell you that I generally watch every Sunday, before we go to church or whatever, is it had that as its headline, but I'd have to go back and watch, but I know it wasn't even 30 seconds. 30 seconds of 12 people, which then begs the question, why when you have a true mass shooting where 12 innocent people are killed in a municipal building, why isn't that the constant drumbeat of news over the weekend? And even this morning, why isn't that still top of mind news? Why isn't that the lead story in every newscast, in every morning show? What's happened here? What's different? I'll tell you what's different. The shooter was a guy by the name of Dwayne Craddock. He was a longtime city employee, had worked there for dozens of years. He's a former National Guardsman, and he's a black man. Then I think there are a couple of other factors. The weapons that he used, 2 handguns, were legally purchased. I think they were both .45 caliber pistols that he purchased from a gun dealer going through the prescribed background check. Less than 12 hours after the story broke, the story disappeared from all the national news broadcasts, and all the liberal websites that had been hyping the original Another Mass Shooting in America had gone silent. The story was off Drudge. I think it may be even today. I haven't checked this morning, but it may have been by Sunday evening. It may have still been somewhere down in the corner. But for all practical purposes, the story has just been dropped. What's the difference? Why the difference in the coverage? I think it's because you have a shooter who was not a white man, who was not an alleged Trump supporter. It didn't involve the so-called assault weapon, a phrase that I hate using because all of my weapons are assault weapons. This pen I'm holding in my hand right now is an assault weapon. Because none of those factors exist, the press is not going to give the story all of the extended exposure that it would give if it had been a white Trump supporter. So when you have a non-Trump supporting black man with a legally purchased pistol killing 12 people, that just doesn't fit the narrative that assault rifles and Trump supporting white men are the problem. So, no pun intended, the story is allowed to die a quick death. But the story did, in my mind, remind me of something. It reminded me that former President Obama demonstrates that sometimes either his willingness to engage in out-and-out lies just continues unabated, or that his willingness to continue in unabated lies continues simply because the audiences that he's speaking to are just so utterly ignorant that they'll buy anything that he said. I don't know whether this was a speech that he was giving. It wasn't a speech. It was one of these forums where two people sit in a chair and, somebody from the media interviews him. So they're interviewing him, and Obama says this.
Some of you may be aware our gun laws in the United States don't make much sense. Anybody can buy any weapon anytime without...
That's what I mean by the ignorant audience. They're cheering the fact he says anybody can buy a weapon at any time.
Without much, if any, regulation, they can buy it over the internet, they can buy machine guns. And for me, having to speak to parents who have lost a child, just 2 days or a day after it had happened, and not being able to assure them that that would change, that we would fix this. I couldn't bring their children back, but I couldn't even promise them that we would change the laws so this didn't happen to somebody else's children.
The audience cheers when he talks about the fact that you can just buy machine guns on the internet. Now, I'm going to take a pause here for a moment because, well, I've always wanted a fully automatic weapon, but I didn't want to have to go through the ATF, and I didn't want to have to go through all of the background checks. I haven't wanted to go and pay the tax and everything else on it, so I've never purchased an automatic weapon. I didn't realize you could just go on the internet and do that. So I'm going to pause the podcast for a moment, and then I'll be right back after I've purchased my fully automatic weapon. Probably get me a silencer too, and then I'll be right back. So hang on. Okay, I'm back. I can't figure out whether I'm doing something wrong or whether Barack Obama was lying to that cheering audience of SEALs when he talked about how easy our gun laws are and that just anybody can purchase a gun over the internet. Anybody can buy a machine gun. I just spent the past 3 hours 3 minutes, trying to buy a fully automatic weapon over the internet, and I can't do it. Well, I can find all the porn I want, but no, I can't buy an automatic weapon over the internet. It's so frustrating to me that there are so many ignorant people being led by ignorant people that don't recognize that the Second Amendment is there to allow us to protect ourselves against a tyrannical government, and that we have a natural God-given right of self-defense. But to go out and claim that anybody can buy a weapon, anybody can buy an automatic weapon, a machine gun, the phrase Obama uses, and you can do that on the internet, and then all the idiots in the audience, all the useful idiots cheer, actually drives me up the wall. Because I don't know who I'm madder at. I don't know whether I'm more mad at Obama for the lies that he spews, or I'm madder at the audience that is ignorant and just sucks up the lies. Or maybe they both drive me nuts. You know, speaking of guns, the dirty little secret in Cook County, Illinois, home of Chicago, is that crime has few consequences. You know, politicians avoid talking about it. The media bury the stories for fear of angering political leaders. But there's a new sheriff, Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart, that may now be breaking bad. In a May 26 interview, he told WBBM Radio in Chicago that he had 51 people who have been charged with first-degree murder out of jail on home confinement pending trial. 51 accused first-degree murderers who are not behind bars. They're confined to their homes. Cook County has accepted a promise by people charged with the most serious of crimes, first-degree murder. A promise that they will stay home and they'll be good little boys and girls. And we wonder why Cook County in Chicago has a violent crime problem. In the At Issue segment with Craig Dellamore, the sheriff explained how electronic home monitoring initially was only supposed to be an option for nonviolent offenders instead of keeping them in jail if they couldn't make bail. It was supposed to be for inconsequential cases, according to the sheriff. But he said that these absolutely brilliant judges on the bond court have granted home confinement to suspects that have been charged with violent crimes, including first-degree murder. The sheriff then goes on to complain of a 700% increase in aggravated discharge of a firearm suspects who are in the home confinement program just in the past year instead of being in jail. Aggravated discharge of a firearm in Illinois is roughly analogous to attempted murder. The sheriff then went on to explain that there was a 945% increase in suspects charged as armed habitual offenders who are out. Now, they're wearing ankle bracelets, but they are out and moving around in the community instead of sitting behind bars if they can't afford bail. Now, we wonder why there's a crime problem in Illinois, and we wonder why it is that liberals want to attack guns as opposed to attacking and going after the perpetrators of gun violence. In all of 2018, only 89 murder suspects face charges. So if the sheriff's comments are correct, Cook County judges and prosecutors have released between 1/3 and 1/2 of all murder suspects in the last year and a half and put them on home confinement. And we wonder why Chicago is Chicago. We wonder why crime is so rampant. We're not doing anything to combat it. Oh, you tried to kill somebody? You go home and we'll tell you when to come back to court. That's almost as stupid as telling people that come to this country illegally, walk up to a Customs and Border Patrol agent, ask for asylum, they're given a slip of paper, sent off into God knows where, and said, come back in 18 months for a hearing. And now we know 90% of them never show up. I wonder how many of these murder suspects confined to home confinement really stay at home, and how many of them actually show back up at court versus how much time, energy, and effort the sheriff has to spend going back and trying to find them. Everything. I'm beginning to believe that everything in this country is upside down, inside out. One of the modern phenomenons that really drives me nuts is this whole idea of virtue signaling, that you you really want people to think that you are really concerned about something when you look at what you're virtue signaling about, you're really being hypocritical. And the latest example of that is the virtue signaling that Hollywood is doing when they threaten to boycott Georgia over their new heartbeat abortion law. Back in 2008, Georgia enacted a series of tax and production incentives that most states do that resulted in Georgia becoming known as the Hollywood of the South. Not only were these tax incentives appealing, but union rules were less strict than those in California. That was a factor in Vancouver becoming the Hollywood of Canada, for example. I always like, if you want a good example, a good lesson in economics, look at that. Tax and production incentives make Georgia the Hollywood of the South, and union rules push people out of California into Georgia. Well, now that Georgia has adopted its heartbeat anti-abortion law, Hollywood is now attempting to use its financial clout and its cultural leverage to influence abortion law in Georgia by threatening to leave the state if the heartbeat law goes into effect. And the list of the Hollywood entities making this threat is quite extensive. It includes Netflix, Disney, NBC Universal, I think Marvel. Let me just think here. I think the Hollywood Reporter, the Hollywood Reporter says Viacom, CBS, Sony, AMC, NBC Universal, Warner Media all go public against Georgia abortion law. Now, Georgia had to know what was at stake when it passed this law. The Wrap has this. Hollywood threw down the gauntlet on Thursday in lining up and threatening to pull their business out of states that have adopted these severe anti-abortion laws. Severe anti-abortion laws, I'll leave that to you, make a judgment, but that tells you where the Wrap's coming from. Billions of dollars in production are at stake. States and countries alike vie for their slice of the current content boom, but apparently no one counted on political pushback from the Dream Machine. As of Thursday, 9 media companies, Netflix, Disney, Warner Media, Sony, AMC, NBC Universal, STX Entertainment, and CBS, with its premium cable companies Showtime and Viacom, have now warned that they might pull their productions out of states that pass bills banning abortion. The studios were still silent for 3 weeks. But as the abortion issue has gathered steam, the Wrap continues, with unexpected force and speed in the past 3 weeks, as one state after another has signed its own version of a heartbeat bill, Louisiana, Alabama, now Ohio, Hollywood started to feel the heat from its own community. Feeling the heat from their own community, meaning from the actors and actresses, led to the avalanche of opposition this week. It's worth noting that this really is little more than virtue signaling on the part of these Hollywood entities. The Daily Caller, for example, notes that Disney is threatening Georgia over its abortion law, but Disney still partners with China, where they hold Muslims in detention camps. That's virtue signaling of the worst kind. Disney opened a $5.5 billion resort in Shanghai in 2016. Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, called Shanghai Disney the company's, quote, greatest opportunity since buying land in Florida. So Disney doesn't mind doing business in a country where people are tracked, people are jailed, people are held in concentration camps simply for being who they are. And on this upcoming anniversary of the Tiananmen Square fiasco, one might ask Bob Iger, how do you feel about doing business in communist China where people are put in concentration camps for simply being Muslim? The Daily Caller also points out that Netflix, for example, is continuing to do production in Egypt. Why is that important? Because abortion is illegal in almost every case, and Netflix is continuing to do business in Jordan, where it is similarly severely restricted. So Netflix is now virtue signaling. The hypocrisy is palpable. BuzzFeed reports that film production crews in Georgia are fighting back against Hollywood studios and actors who are proposing a boycott of the state after Governor Brian Kemp signed a bill that would ban abortions after a heartbeat is detected. BuzzFeed reports it's ultimately hurting more people than it is going to do any justice. A 39-year-old best boy grip told BuzzFeed News about a possible boycott. The grip preferred to remain anonymous because, like many other staffers who spoke to BuzzFeed News, he's afraid of losing his job. He went on to say, it's not going to affect the politicians and the actors. They're still going to keep going to work in other places like they always have. But with us here, it's going to destroy us. Oh, but what's more important? To be perceived in the media that, oh, we're standing up to Georgia. Yeah, you're hurting the little people, and you're still doing productions in other countries. Oh, I didn't even mention Ireland, where I think it's virtually against the law to get an abortion in Ireland. They're still doing productions in Ireland. They're doing productions in China. They're doing productions in Jordan. They're doing productions all over the world where abortion is outlawed. But oh, here? No, we're going to hurt the little people. Virtue signaling is disgusting. Hey, Gillette, I'm still thinking about you, too. One of the great things about living in the United States of America is the incredible progress that we have. And that progress is a double-edged sword, because I think in part it has made us dumb, fat, and lazy, and we don't understand just exactly how great we have it in this country. I won't go into my whole tirade about people being able to travel, but I wish more people could travel to S-hole countries. Oh, by the way, can I add a parenthetical real quickly? Before I forget it, if you have not watched or are not watching the HBO miniseries called Chernobyl, must watch. I have binged watched and caught up with it, and I think the next episode is tonight, so I'm sure that Tamara and I will watch it tonight because I've got her sucked into it now too. But Chernobyl is, well, it's obviously about Chernobyl, but the storyline, which is fascinating to me because it's on HBO, is much more than about the meltdown and explosion at the Chernobyl facility. It's really a fantastic study in just how bad totalitarian governments are, whether it's communism or socialism, when the state controls everything. And when you are answerable to the state, it shows how it can have dire consequences. So, into parenthetical, but if you have a chance to watch Chernobyl, I want you to watch Chernobyl. Highly recommend it. But back to my dumbassery. I do think that we sometimes are so dumb, fat, and happy in this country because we live a life of luxury. One by one, everything that we have that makes life so much better in this country than almost any country usually gets taken away by some authoritarian dumbass that is out on some self-righteous kick because, well, it's a progressive being progressive. It's a progressive thinking that the way to make progress is to actually go backwards. And a great example of that is now they want to ban lawnmowers. Writing for an online site called The Stranger, this person writes, a real city will ban lawnmowers. They are not only a waste of time and resources, but they represent so much that's so awful about the middle-class frame of mind, which is directed at every point by a notion of respectability that has no other function than its signification. Who writes that? To others who are of the same class. One does not love a mowed lawn for itself. One instead loves to see others can see that they have done as others of the same class are expected to do, cut the lawn. And this sorry game of appearances, of course, has its roots, like so much of the United States' tiresome middle-class culture, in the habits of England's pre-industrial elites. Holy crap, that was a lot to read. Because I'm thinking to myself, if I could get rid of all of my yard, this is what I like about the undisclosed location. Well, of course, it's got a yard, but Tamara likes to get on the riding lawnmower down there, and so, but here, yeah, I would rather just have all xeriscape. I just give me all rocks. I don't care about a finely manicured lawn. But these dumbasses really want America to just go back to seed. They just want us to go back to just the wild. The motive is sheer hatred for anything respectable. The hatred often takes on class warfare, just as this guy does. The main theme to the middle class's story has been an absence of a spine or the imagination to create its own codes or values. Instead, it takes every opportunity presented by the producers of mass goods, and then they list the car, the single-family home, kitchens with all manner of appliances, to adopt the most basic customs of the agrarian elite of old. Gosh, I never realized that my washing machine, my dryer, my dishwasher, my blender, what else am I missing? I suppose my television, my garbage disposal, those are just adopting the most basic customs of the agrarian elite of old. So the bottom line is, this is the dumbassery of the left. Single-family homes, kitchens that are well-equipped with useful appliances, all these things must be banned because, well, they remind the Marxist dumbasses of pre-industrial elites. And I guess lawnmowers stand accused of causing it to be too hot out in accordance with liberal global warming doctrine. I think the most important reason we must ban lawnmowers, here's what he writes. I will begin the point of this post, which concerns the biological reason for banning lawnmowers, a tool that only the city should own and use in the interest of the greater good rather than the vapid taste of the middle class. It is this. Urban gardens need to be left alone to grow. Only cities should own and use lawnmowers, and they should only do so in the interest of the greater good rather than the vapid tastes of the middle class? Holy Batman. I guess some see urban blight as the unintended consequences of liberalism. As I see it, it isn't always unintended. I think they're actually intentionally wanting to drag us back into the Stone Age, and they call that progress. I'm not a big fan of Eric Erickson's, but that's neither here nor there. I do want to use him, though, as an example of how easy it is to get suspended from Twitter. The following joke was enough to get him suspended. He tweeted, quote, Elizabeth Warren set to introduce the Wrecking American Prosperity Under Marxism, or Wampum Act, wherein she gives everything away for free. Now that joke was said to violate the Twitter rule against hateful conduct, as if somehow Eric Erickson were maligning politically sacred Indians instead of poking lighthearted fun at Elizabeth Warren for advancing her career by pretending to be a Native American. Now, no offense to Eric Erickson, and actually congratulations on a good joke, but seeing him temporarily banned is like being told you can't eat mayonnaise because it's too spicy. Yeah, that's just me and Eric Erickson. I don't read anything into that. I'm just not a big fan. But the bigger point is, Twitter had better suspend The Breakfast Club too. The Breakfast Club is a radio program, and they recently had Elizabeth Warren on. And they brought up the similarity of Elizabeth Warren and compared her to Rachel Dolezal. Here's what was said.
Your family told you were Native American?
Yeah.
Charlamagne tells me I'm Dominican, but I don't believe him.
You are. How long did you hold on to that? Because there was some reports that said you were Native American on your Texas bar license and that you said you were Native American on some documents when you were a professor at Harvard. Yeah. Like, why'd you do that?
So it's what I believe. You know, that's, like I said, it's what I learned from my family.
When did you find out you weren't?
Well, you know, I'm not a person of color. I'm not a citizen of a tribe. And tribal citizenship is an important distinction and not something I am. So.
Were there any benefits to that?
No. Boston Globe did a full investigation. It never affected, nothing about my family ever affected any job I ever got.
Mm-hmm. You didn't get a discount in college? No.
You kind of like the original Rachel Dolezal a little bit. Rachel Dolezal was a white woman pretending to be black.
No, this is what I learned from my family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what
I love it. No wonder they call her Walking Eagle. She's far too full of it to actually fly. But seriously, so Eric Erickson gets suspended from Twitter for a joke about Warren introducing and you've got to get the acronym here, Wrecking American Prosperity Under Marxism, or Wampum Act, wherein she gives away everything for free. It's actually not a bad joke. Wampum, I mean, that's a pretty good acronym, right? But what about the Breakfast Club? Comparing Elizabeth Warren to Rachel Dolezal, a white woman pretending to be black. Has the Breakfast Club been suspended from Twitter? Of course not. Because, well, that was a black man asking her whether or not there were any benefits and making the comparison to Rachel Dolezal. So you see, the white Eric Erickson can make his statement, but the black guy, or Eric Erickson, can't, but the black guy can. Yeah. Double standard? Of course. Let's get a couple of taxpayer relief shots in. The first one comes to us. By the way, let me just remind everybody, taxpayer relief shots are not the celebration of the death of a thug. The taxpayer relief shot is a celebration of the fact that in this country, we're still able to legally defend ourselves against thugs. And way too often, in cases where people are reporting on crimes or any number of things, it gets lost in all of the news reporting that sometimes private, ordinary citizens just going about their own business in their homes, in their workplaces, or wherever else it might be, end up taking out a bad person, intent on doing harm, because we have a natural God-given right of self-defense. And I think that needs to be celebrated. I think we need to recognize those stories where somebody defends themselves. And if the thug dies, the thug dies. You know what? Perhaps if the thug hadn't been trying to rob the convenience store, break into your home, the thug wouldn't have died. The first one comes to us from Las Vegas.
Friday afternoon, two brothers were home when they told police a man broke in.
There was an unknown black male who was in the hallway who then started fighting with the older brother.
That's when police say the younger brother pulled out a gun.
At some point during that struggle, the younger brother fired several rounds, striking the unknown black male.
The threat has to be immediate and present.
Retired Metro Detective Phil Ramos said in this case it was.
People are getting so tired of being victimized all the time. People are getting tired of the lawlessness that's going on and the disrespect to their own property.
And Ramos...
Man, that guy, whoever that lawyer was, is spot on. You are in your home. Someone has broken in. Your brother is in a struggle with that individual. Of course, that's under the law of self-defense, every right to take out the intruder.
Believes more and more people are choosing fight over flight.
Criminals aren't known for their intellect, so they're not going to learn from this. They'll keep doing it, and they'll keep getting shot.
The thugs will not learn, and the thugs will continue to get shot, but you and I can learn. And you can share these taxpayer relief shots with people who are either afraid to defend themselves, afraid of guns, and I'm not advocating that everybody should own a gun. But I am advocating that everybody should learn that they have the right to defend themselves.
Ramos added homeowners need to understand their rights and when it's the right time to act.
That's kind of a falsehood that people believe in. Is if they're in my property, I can shoot them. No, that's not true. That threat still has to be there.
Like a month ago, they were here and broke into my house.
Kirk Braswell lives near this home. He said his house was just targeted too.
Oh yeah, I got a gun now. I didn't then, but I do now.
He agrees the brothers did the right thing.
You got to protect yourself at all times. I mean, if you're home and they're in your home, then you got to feel for your life. That's all I got to say.
But Ramos reminds homeowners there are other options to protect your property and, more importantly, your life.
It's just stuff. It can be replaced. Your life can't be replaced. Just if you can't defend yourself, if you're not armed, if you're not able to stop the threat, then don't try it.
And we also visited the two brothers' home today, but no one responded. Police have not identified the person who was shot. Tiana Bonner, Fox 5 News, local, Las Vegas.
And for the next one, we go to the town of Deerfield. 2 people were shot and killed after they were caught by the homeowner trying to break into a residence on Walker Road in Deerfield Tuesday afternoon, according to Leo's. The homeowner, age 64, has been charged with illegally possessing the handgun he used to shoot the intruders. No charges have been filed so far in relation to the 2 deaths. According to New York State penal law, a person in their home is allowed to use deadly physical force to prevent a burglary by an intruder. The state popo said the aunt and nephew attempted to break into the residence at about 2:40 p.m. They were in the garage trying to break into the residence, according to the popo. Keller said the homeowner was home during the burglary attempt, and he found the person in his garage where he shot them both with a handgun. Trooper said that Patricia Talacaro was killed at the scene, while Nicholas Talacaro was able to flee the residence. Nicholas was given a ride by a private vehicle to a hospital, where he later died of his injuries. Keller said he did not know the motivation for the burglary attempt. State police searched the home following the death. They found evidence to indicate he had committed other recent burglaries. We found a room with a large amount of items that we believe were proceeds in other burglaries. Following the shooting, the homeowner was taken into custody and interviewed. State police said they learned that the homeowner did not have a permit for his handgun, which is required by state law. He did not have a legally possessed permit. He's been charged with 1 count of criminal possession of a firearm, a Class E felony, scheduled for arraignment later this week. If you're going, first of all, don't get me off on I have to have a permit to own a gun. Do I have to have a permit to not be, to be secure in my home against unreasonable searches? Do I have to have a permit to invoke my right against self-incrimination? This kind of stuff drives me nuts. But it's a good example. It's a good example of, if you're going to defend yourself, make sure you can legally do so. And if the law of your state, as much as we may abhor that law, requires you to have a permit for the handgun, for Pete's sake, get a permit for the handgun. Now, interestingly, notice that he has not been charged with murder. He's not been charged with aggravated assault. He's only been charged with not having a permit for the gun. But the bigger problem's going to come in the wrongful death lawsuits that the relatives of his victims are going to file against him, and more likely than not, his homeowner's policy is not going to defend him because he failed to have a permit for the gun. Lesson: if you're going to defend yourself, make sure you are lawfully capable of doing so. And if that means that the jurisdiction that you live in requires that you have a permit for the handgun, make sure you have a permit for the handgun. The next taxpayer relief shot, comes to us from Wilmington, North Carolina.
Investigations are underway after officers shoot and kill a suspect. The man barricaded himself inside a home on Owens Court. That's in the Pine Valley area.
When he came out, police say the man had several guns. He did not follow officers' commands to drop the weapons. That's when the officers fired and killed that man. WECT's Alex Carino live at the scene following the new details on this breaking news. Now, this all started as police responded to reports of shots fired in that same area.
Alex, do we know why the man barricaded himself inside the home?
Well, Fran, John, police have not released an official reason why this man barricaded himself inside the home. But I did talk to a girl that lives in this neighborhood. She says that she babysits for a family that lives just a few doors down from where this all took place. When she heard what happened, she got worried about that family and the kids, so she called their mom, and the mom told them that they were okay, but she had a little more details than we were able to get from police at that time.
What they found out was that the man that this happened to was drinking and started making suicidal comments, and then he followed his family into the house with a gun and proceeded to threaten them and barricade his house.
And then when you come out, you're waving your gun, you're going to end up getting shot. So the lesson here is, if you're going to get drunk and then you're going to threaten your family and barricade yourself in your house, when you finally do come out, I'd suggest you come out with your hands in the air and you come out slowly. Otherwise, you're going to end up DRT, dead right there. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Brown Unplugged podcast. Real quickly, haven't asked you for a while, but I'm going to ask you today. Please go to michaelbrowntoday.com, michaelbrowntoday.com. There you'll find all the social media icons where you can follow me on all the social media platforms. Please do that. And then, as a reminder, we're now on iTunes. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And if you go over and you do subscribe, I'd greatly appreciate it if you would leave a 5-star rating. And if you have time, be sure and leave us a written review if you have time to write a written review. It always helps getting the podcast distributed, which is what we're trying to do. And always email me if you have comments, suggestions, or whatever, or you can do it on the Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/Michael D. Brown. Ask to join the private discussion group there. And if you have questions or comments, do it there. And again, thanks for listening to this episode, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow.